Well, two of the parents featured in the film are joining us here today. Cheryl Softich is joining us from Minnesota. Her son, Noah Pierce, killed himself in July of 2007. Cheryl, thank you very much for joining us today. Talk about what happened when your son returned from Iraq.
My son returned physically, but mentally he never returned. He served 2 tours of duty in Iraq, turning 19 and 21 over there. And my son died from the inside out, which is what post-traumatic stress will do to you left untreated. It festers and grows. And he came home, and about 1.5 years after being home, he put a gun to his head and he pulled the trigger, and he is dead. He couldn't handle the nightmares, and he couldn't do it. He didn't want to live that way for the rest of his life, and he just got ridiculed for having post-traumatic stress disorder because there's such a stigma on it. The American people don't want to really seem to acknowledge that it's no different than losing a limb, a leg, or an arm. It just needs to be treated differently.
Cheryl, describe how he dealt at the end and what you saw the signs were. In the film, you talk about your son feeling like he had gone bad because he had killed people in Iraq.
And that's the way he felt. He felt that he killed, and so now it was time for him to be dead because he wasn't brought up to kill people. And I could never get him to understand that what he did was he had a job. It was for the Army, and it was his job. And he didn't kill like he thought he did. Everybody's shot. It doesn't mean Noah necessarily killed anybody, but he did kill a few people, as happens in war, and it ate him up from the inside out. He couldn't deal with it.
It was very graphic, his feeling about himself and the way he killed himself, Cheryl. If you could bring yourself to talk about that.
He went to a childhood spot that he had always went to hang out when he skipped school or when he was rabbit hunting or whatever. And he stabbed each and every one of his IDs through the face with a pocket knife. He put his fist through the side window on his truck so he wouldn't have to look at his face. He put his dog tag to his temple. He wedged the gun to that dog tag, and he pulled the trigger. It was his way of saying that I am dead because of my tours in Iraq. The Army killed me. It was his way of letting me know why he did it. It had nothing to do with us.
You've kept the gun, you've kept the truck he killed himself in. You even asked the police for the dog tag that he shot through his temple into his head.
Originally, well, I didn't know about the dog tags until months after the fact. The cops never told me that part of it. When I found out about the dog tag, yes, I wanted it back to go with its mate. As far as the gun, I wanted that gun destroyed. And a year later, that gun was still not destroyed, so I got angry. And I told them, if it's not destroyed, then I want it back. And yes, I do have the gun. I don't know why I have the gun, but I do have the gun. I have the truck. I have the dog tag. It hangs, seriously, it hangs by my bed.
And he wrote you a note as well, is that right?
Yes, he did. First thing in the note, he says he's been in hell since the invasion in 2002. And the last few months of his life, he went out of his way to make sure that he kept myself and my daughter and my husband away from him. He didn't want us to see how bad he was suffering, even though he tried to keep Mom away. It didn't work. Mom showed up every day. I usually left him in tears because he was mean to me, verbally mean, not physically. Verbally mean just to keep me at a distance. It didn't work. I always went back for more. I knew that he was suffering, and he needed to know I was on his side. So I went back time and time again.
We're also joined by Chris Scheuerman, his son, Jason, shot himself in 2005 after serving in Iraq. Both are featured in John and Matt's film that'll air on HBO called Wartorn. Chris, one of your sons served in Afghanistan. Jason served in Iraq in 2005. Describe what happened to him. Describe your last experiences with Jason.
It's my opinion that Jason suffered from a traumatic brain injury secondary to an improvised explosive device. After suffering that injury, he fell into bouts of depression, and he also became suicidal. He wrote a suicide note to his mother in early July, and we notified the Army and told the Army all of this was going on. They basically disregarded that warning. Signs of severe depression or PTSD, and took it for him disobeying. They took minor incidences like being out of uniform, and they would punish him severely for that. And that took a great toll on my son.
He sought help in Iraq.
While Jason was in Iraq, he was sent on a command-directed psychological examination. The Department of Defense requires that those examinations be conducted by a doctoral level provider. Jason was seen by an individual who held no credentials, no training, and no license. Gave him a standardized test and a 10-minute conversation, and sent him back to his unit with a diagnosis of malingering.
And describe the last conversation you had with Jason on the phone.
The last time I talked to my son was when he had just seen the individual who was supposed to help him. He described to me what had happened. I told him that there was no way anyone could come up with any sort of diagnosis based on a standardized test and a 10-minute conversation. I implored my son to go back and get a second opinion. At this point, Jason had been failed by his leadership. He had been failed by the chaplaincy, and now he had been failed by the medical community. All three pillars of foundation that a soldier has settled on had failed him. I believe my son felt absolutely alone, and he told me he could not go back for a second opinion, that they said he was faking it and he just needed to man up.
And you have not received a condolence letter from President Obama, is that correct?
It has been a policy dating back to the Clinton administration that if a soldier dies in theater secondary to a mental disorder and take their own life, the family does not receive a letter of condolence.
Do you want one?
No. Yes, I want one. I want my son's sacrifice recognized. My son was a patriot. He was sick. He was subjected to egregious malpractice. He was abused by his leadership and eventually forced into the closet of his barracks room where he shot himself.
After he came back from seeing seeking help, and they told him no, he was told to go to his room, and no one else was to be near him. Is that right, Chris Sherman?
A couple weeks after he was sent back to his unit, they had been subjecting him to sleep deprivation. They would wake him up in the middle of the night, tell him to put on his battle gear and run up and down the stairs. They cut off all of his communication with his family. Basically cut him off from all his support structure. They charged him again with being out of uniform. And during those proceedings, his first sergeant told him that if he didn't get his stuff together, that if he was trying to get out of the Army based on a mental issue, that he would be sent to prison and abused in prison. After that encounter, they brought him back to his barracks, sent him to his room with his weapon and his ammunition, and told everyone to stay away from him.
And that's when he killed himself.
Yes.
Cheryl.
He was all alone.
Cheryl,
Yeah.
as we wrap up, do you feel your son would be alive today if he had gotten counseling?
I know he would be alive today if he had gotten counseling. He tried to get counseling, but he slipped through every crack there was to slip through, and he finally gave up, but he did try. Had they counseled him before he went to his second tour, he would probably still be alive.
And John and Matt, very briefly, we have to wrap, but you document PTSD from Civil War through today. Is the treatment getting any better?
They've just come up with the diagnosis of post-traumatic stress in the last 30 years, even though we know in the documentary shows that it's been the handmaiden of warfare ever since the beginning of time. If you have war, you have post-traumatic stress, and we have to think about that before we send our men and women into warfare.
We have to end it there. We want to thank you all for being with us. The HBO documentary airs on Veterans Day. I'm Amy Goodman with Sharif Abdel-Quddus. Thanks for joining us.